Hi everyone, I'm Tom.
And I'm Tom.
And you're watching
Or listening to
With the Toms podcast.
Across the series, we'll be delving into the world of learning. Stuff like psychology behind how people learn, how to engage with learners, and what makes good content.
Because we all know not all content is made equal.
Okay, let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of With the Toms podcast. In this episode, we're going to cover why we think that not all content is made equal. And I guess what I mean by that is what actually makes good content and conversely, what makes bad content. So we're going to treat this as more of like a conversation really. In some of the other episodes we're going to have guests and we're kind of going into key topics, but I think this will work best if we just have a conversation. So I guess Tom and I, we're in the middle of making content right now. We're launching a new learning library. You might have seen some of our trailers going out. And so we're right in the middle of making 10 courses right now, really, growing out into a much bigger library. So I suppose, Tom, as we're building those, just one of what actually makes great content.
I think one of the things we've discovered more recently is the lack of quality and devil's in the detail in other people's work. And I think when we send out our little trailers to sort of test the water, I think people pick up on all those little bits, don't they? Our animations are very high quality. We use very good sound, very good voiceover. We've got all these sound effects through it. Everything's very engaging, isn't it? You find you're sort of immersed within the actual product itself. So yeah, I think you would sort of say what engages people, I think it is just that high quality story. Yeah. Because we do everything through story, everything's themed as well. So yeah, I think that we sort of found quite a happy medium with that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's one of the courses and one of the trailers that we're pushing out over the next few days, and maybe you may have seen it already, is a course around lone working. Yeah. And I think some of what you've said there actually around the fact that when you get a good theme and you bring that together with a strong strong script, and then there was a strong story that goes alongside that, and actually that's when all of those kind of key elements come together. So in this particular example, lone worker, we converted that into the Lone Ranger, and that was the kind of topic. And actually I think when you get that combination of great quality animation, strong script with really good learning outcomes, actually that melds together to create great content. And as you say, it's what hooks it, engages people. And I think, like you said, there is so much content out there, and actually a lot of content, sometimes you think about that Lone Worker trailer, there was a little intro at the start where literally it kicks in, the music starts and the screen splits. Yeah. It's such a tiny detail.
It is a tiny detail, but there's so much that goes behind it as well. Everything from the voiceover to the timing of the sound effect to even a hanging of a title on the screen. Yeah. You probably wouldn't notice it if you weren't a creative director or something, but if you to the trained eye, you'd say that's been really, really sort of considered. Yeah. And I think the other reason we tell it through stories and we theme it is because it's memorable and people will remember it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's easier to write a script as well if you theme it, because you start off with a series of 2 or 3 characters at the beginning. You can carry them through as a complete story. So yes, it's easier. It's easier to do metaphor and delivery, like primary and recency effects all the way throughout. Yeah. It just makes your life a little bit easier. And plus, I suppose people have got to take learning or digital learning. We might as well make it fun and engaging anyway. Absolutely. So that's why we sort of lace it with sort of comedy and sort of hyperbole throughout, really. So,
absolutely. And I suppose a couple of things that you touched on there. So we have this sort of strapline, don't we, that we push out with a lot of our stuff that says we're changing the way in which people train and retain the sort of learning information. And I suppose some of the things that you've hit on there is probably what actually is how we're changing it. So I think you mentioned there about the quality of the voiceover. I think that is such a critical factor. I think a lot of content out there can be quite engaging, but then if you stick a really dull, dry, if I dare to say it, corporate voiceover at the top of it, it can lose its emphasis. But I suppose, what else do you think there is that we do that really helps people, I suppose, retain the learning that we're pushing out? What else would you kind of call out from our content, Tom?
I think people throw that term gamification around, don't they? I think they do it very loosely, and I don't think they fully understand what it actually entails. And I think sometimes it's helped to sort of add some clarification to that. I think our courses are quite immersive. I think we don't tend to just do the typical Q&As at the end. Our stuff is it is gamified, so there are actual games throughout. Yep. So you might have 10 seconds or 20 seconds of actual footage or learning, at that point you come to a point in the course where you have maybe a learning pathway that you could choose to either watch the next bit or take a little bit of a refresher on the course.
Yeah.
It might be a bit of a quiz, might be a bit of a game. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing out there at the moment is 1980s, 1990s gaming coming back, sort of, you know, I don't know what you call them really, little characters in the centre of the screen that dance around and hit words associated with that particular course. Yeah. So it sort of reinforces what they've just sort of taken, really. It does add that extra sort of third degree to the course, because I think what people tend to sort of do, and they're sort of afraid of doing, is they stick within the course design program, the authoring facility, which might be articulate, for instance. So if they're template driven, which they are, and they don't have that ability to sort of create their own assets, then they'll stick with it. But we're thinking outside, I hate that expression, outside of the box, but we're forcing that extra bit of gamification by designing outside of it and then programming it in. So
and I think that's probably the one big thing that I always think people throw it around a lot, but is this kind of term instructional design, you know, and that people say that they kind of design courses, but I think good instructional design is actually really difficult to do well. You know, lots of people maybe pretend, it's probably a bit harsh, but think they're doing it. But to do it properly, where you're really setting yourself in a seat and saying, if I'm taking this course, what are the learning outcomes and how am I going to achieve those through the course? To do that well is really difficult, isn't it?
It is really difficult, and it's something that we plan very early on at the script and the product design stage anyway. So I think a lot of learning out there is very exhaustive and it's very lengthy. You might you might see 500 words on a screen or hear 500 words, and at that point it might move to another scene. You might not even have control of that. Whereas I think where we try to be a little bit more different is we might do 10, 20 seconds and then allow the user, we give them that empowerment to then move on. And it might be linear and they might have to take it, but it also might have multiple pathways. But the point is, it is small and it's chunky, so it's broken up.
Yes.
And it goes back to how we actually learn as human beings, not taking all this volume of information in at once and then just we've just lost interest. So
absolutely. Great. So maybe just to round this episode out and to finish off, I mean, we've talked there quite a lot about what makes engaging content, why we think some content is better than others, and not all content is made equal. But what would you say, maybe 2-3 points that make what makes content bad? What is some poor examples out there?
I think we all agree on the PowerPoint.
PowerPoint
is pretty awful. I think yes, very clip-arty corporate voiceover. If you're going to have it, absolutely terrible. And then another really big thing that makes awful learning is a poorly thought out blueprint of a product, i.e. the learning journey.
Yes.
If it's not thought out, then it's a big no-no.
I think a lot of people, another term that gets thrown around a lot is this kind of concept of micro-learning, and you know, there's a lot in it, and I guess a lot of our content, we squeeze it, we make it bite-sized, but I think people sometimes take courses that are very complicated, very long, and just think they can chunk them down, or even take a very long course and break it into, as you were describing, then multiple modules or smaller chunks, but that doesn't make for a great course, does it? So, you know, lots of people have assets out there that already exist and maybe want to make their learning more engaging, but I would always urge to say, go back, think about your script and your storyboards, you know, and really spend the time at the front end. That's what gets the best content out at the end of the day.
And think about the audience as well.
Absolutely.
I think the way we do some very good wins is our content's very broad. You show it to 13-year-olds, show it to sort of 60 mature-year-old audience, and they equally enjoy it as much.
Yeah, absolutely universal. Great. Well, if you haven't already, check out some of our trailers, check out some of our teasers. We think that they're great examples of really engaging content. As we say, not all content is made equal, so check us out. If you haven't already, follow us on social media. Otherwise, I'm going to say it's good night from him.
And it's good night from him.
Thanks for listening.